This would have been a sad day indeed for W.A.C. Bennett, the former Premier of British Columbia. I remember well when he flew a kite with myself and Marjorie Nichols one day many years ago, when he said, do you think it'd be a good idea to have a Bank of British Columbia like the Bank of America? And he fought it through the Senate, and he did the best he could. And today was the end of a dream, of more than W.A.C. Bennett's dream. But first, here's Ted with the rundown.
How much more room is there on your television dial? More than 1,000 Native communities hope soon to have their own nationwide television network. Coming up with Webster, Tony Belcourt, Vice President of Seneca Communications. Is Vancouver on the verge of literally bursting at its seams, or are we on the threshold of something great? Webster gets at the heart of the issues with Vancouver Mayor Gordon Campbell. But first, the death of a dream. The fate of the once proud Bank of B.C. is now sealed. Tonight, Webster talks to Edgar Kaiser, former Chief Executive Officer of the Bank of B.C.
And my first question to Edgar Kaiser is a perfectly simple one. You took over the bank September the 25th, 1984, right?
Right.
There was no way that bank could have been saved after the fall of '84, was there?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
The bank was in disastrous trouble, and it had to come to this kind of unhappy disappearance of its name, although part of its life will still be alive because of the economic climate.
Oh, I think that's right. There wasn't another alternative for our bank.
Now, Mr. Parker told us today that in the fourth quarter of '86, what would have happened if it had not gone for the agreement with Hongkong Bank?
Well, it's difficult to say exactly what would have happened, but let me paint a probable picture. The difficulty with a bank, unlike a normal corporation, is that banks depend upon confidence, as you know. So when a bank declares a loss, it isn't like a manufacturing company that can have a bad quarter or a bad year. If our bank was going to declare losses, which it would have, we would have had losses throughout 1987 and could well have had losses into 1988. Being a small regional bank, how could you expect your depositors to stay with you? And
it was, in fact, a disastrous situation, and had it gone into liquidation or gone under, CDIC would have been stuck for $1.3 billion insured deposits. Nobody would have got stuck for the 350 million uninsured deposits. How many jobs would have been lost then?
Well, put it to in a broader context, we would have had 15,000 customers of the bank not taken care of, a little over 14,000 direct employment, let alone all the indirect employment that our branches had. So it would have been an enormous loss to Western Canada.
Do you feel that you made any major mistakes which contributed to the, in effect, the demise of the Bank of B.C.?
Oh, sure, Jack. I mean, anytime something that you try to do with all that you know how to give to something doesn't work, you always second-guess yourself.
For instance, one of you was the expansion to the pioneer branches, the 9 branches throughout the prairies. That was an unwise move, as it now looks.
Well, exactly. In hindsight, you say we were able to acquire 9 branches, a deposit and customer base, for the cost of less than doing one branch on your own. And everybody was saying, this bank has to diversify. As you remember, my first interviews with you were saying, how can you make it as a regional bank dependent only in British Columbia and Alberta? So this was a king strike. We were diversifying.
You were full of confidence. You were diversifying, and it was a bad move because of the economy.
As it turned out. Absolutely right.
Now, you took a few shots today at the meeting, so I'll give you a few shots, perhaps from a different angle. When you took over in September '84, how much fresh capital did you raise?
About $160 million.
How much of it was your own money?
A little over $8 million.
How much of that $8 million, taking the stock now at between 55 cents and $1.20, have you lost?
Well, I can't answer that. In other words, right now the stock is trading, let's say, for 73 cents.
Right.
As Dale Parker said today at the meeting, we really don't know what the final value will be. Now, the press has estimated that I will lose about $7 million.
And what do you estimate you'll lose? About $6 million.
More than I would like to.
Yeah, but that was a personal investment which you lost.
Yes.
Now, for the Clancy questions, was it Clancy or another man who was asking questions today? Do you feel shamefaced about your $700,000 settlement from the Bank of B.C.?
No, but I have to answer it this way. It was estimated that the settlement was $700,000. You left a little early. I got asked the question, as did Dale Parker, what was my settlement? There has been no settlement agreed upon, so I don't know what that number is.
But
there is a contract with the bank that I have that is worth, on a present value basis, some amount of money. Now, I haven't worked on that. Neither has Dale Parker. So I don't know what the value of that is. But do I feel badly that I had a contract with the bank? Not at all. What I feel badly about is that we all invested in the idea of a Western-based Canadian-owned bank, and it did not work.
Just while we're on that subject, of course, I was there when you said that you'd waived the pension which had been provided for you at $100,000 a year at age 60. Is that correct?
That's so. That's right.
Just said, keep it.
Right.
Why?
Well,
I mean, you're a man who's noted for his monetary aptitude. Was this a gesture of kind of what?
No, I mean, when I joined the bank, it was a belief that this was important to all of us, and I thought with a lot of hard work and a little bit of luck, it could work. As it turned out, we didn't have the luck. We did have the hard work. It didn't work. But I'd only worked for the bank for 2 years. And the purpose of a pension plan is if you really devote a great portion of your life to this, and that didn't seem right to me.
So you said, forget the pension.
Yes.
Right, now let's go to the cooperation from the federal and provincial governments at about the time when the CCB went down the tube, and that famous Labor Day weekend, the Northland Bank also went down the tube. At that time, surely it was writ in stone that the Bank of B.C., which was kind of trepidatious, would go down the tube.
Go ahead.
Would it?
Would we have gone down the tube?
Yeah. You did go down the tube.
Yeah, I mean, there were a number of events. Certainly, not just the event of the failures of Northland and CC banks, but the way in which they occurred had a traumatic effect upon our bank.
The question I was really asking, though, was, I noticed in Parker's address today, there was, I think, a reference to the fact that the governments would not come to your aid. Federal and the 4 Western provinces.
That's so. As Dale told the audience in response to a question, we did ask the 4 Western provinces for a support package for the bank, and they determined that wasn't what they thought they ought to do.
That could have saved the bank, could it? Or would it have been impossible to save the bank in the long run anyway, being a small, kind of regionally based Western bank?
No, I don't think that. In other words, if you say, do I think you can have a Canadian-owned, Western-based bank or financial institution? Yes, I do think you can. Absent anything else, I think you can. Now, it was their judgment that their putting money into our institution would not work. Our judgment was that it would have.
How much was the pressure from the big banks against saving the Bank of B.C.? The big 5. Oh. Were they against you? Was it not a fact that one of the big 5 was quite desperate to take over your whole base in the West here?
Well, certainly that was reported in the press.
Well, the TD had big ads in the paper trying to kind of steal your customers.
That's right.
They were getting nervous about you, perhaps.
Well, you really made two statements or 2 questions. One was, how much did they want us to fail versus how much were they not helping us? I don't think they were going out of their way to help us. That's different than saying they were deliberately trying to sink the Bank of British Columbia.
So you don't put any blame on anybody except the economy and perhaps some bad decisions made by you and others in the Bank of B.C.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's right. There had to be a will to have this institution based out of Toronto exist, and that will did not exist. And in the face of the economy we were facing here, without that political will, you couldn't make it happen.
And with the state of the BC economy today, it's highly unlikely that any regional bank could make a go of it.
No, I wouldn't say that. I can't make that leap of faith.
So in 1984, you were a hero, and as the guy in the province said, a couple of years later, you were a bum.
Well, I think I'm the same person I was in '84.
What do you think of the economy at the moment?
Well, I guess I'm not one of those that thinks it's a disaster. Clearly it's not booming, but that doesn't mean we're going to sink into the Pacific. The only way we'll do that is if, for example, let's take the Bank of British Columbia experience, which clearly did not work, and nobody feels good about that, obviously. Certainly I don't, and I don't think anyone else associated with it does. But if that means I stop trying, if I'm going to pick up my marbles and go home and stop trying, we won't have an economy here. This is home.
Many people don't know you're a Canadian citizen. They still think of you as an American. Is that right?
Well, you know more about that than I would, but yeah, that's right, I am a Canadian.
Any chance you might go work for Vanders then?
No, I don't think so.
You haven't been looking for any jobs with the provincial government?
No, actually, I haven't.
Yeah. I put it to him the other night, and he said if your name was put forward, he would consider your curriculum vitae. I just wondered, that's all.
Well, I'm glad the Premier said that, but no, I'm not being asked to do any government jobs.
Well, you're sad today. It's the end of a dream.
Well, I think for all of us. But it doesn't mean it's the end of Western Canada. It doesn't mean it's the end of business that can be run and operated out of here.
Oh, one other question before I forget. Does this international banking center mean a thing at all here? Or is it just a little piece of Ottawa PR for the West Coast?
Well, by your tone of voice, you clearly don't think it means anything.
I think it means suitcase bankers.
Well, I think it's better to have it than not to have it. And what we can do with it is up to us. We can turn it into something, and it may not be as much as you want, but I haven't found many places in the world where somebody else is going to give you something. We have to earn what we get out here. At least we got something.
You game for some phone calls?
Sure.
Edgar Kaiser, former President and Chief Operating Officer, Executive Officer of the Bank of B.C., which has now been folded into the Hongkong Bank.
Right.
After the break. I'm basically underneath it all a gossip columnist, and I want to get a couple of things straight. One, you surrendered the $100,000 a year pension.
Yes.
Out of the goodness of your heart. You won't tell me precisely what your contract was. It was supposed to be 5-year no cut, wasn't it?
No, I'm not well, no, there's a present value, and I don't know what that is.
But I thought you did it for $1 a year at one time.
Well, I did. When the bank got into difficulty, I just didn't take a salary.
You just quit it?
Yep.
Okay, let's go to phones to Mr. Kaiser. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. I'd just like to say that I think it's very great that Mr. Kaiser risked his own money and tried to bring the bank and keep it going for Canada, for BC especially. And he stood and lost a lot of money, but he did do it. And that's all I'd like to do is congratulate him and thank him very much on behalf of all the BC people I think that I do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. How does that grab you?
Thank you. I wish you'd made a success of it.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack?
Yeah.
Yes, I have two questions for Mr. Kaiser. The first one is, what does he think is going to happen with the bank in 1997 when China takes over Hong Kong? Second question, would he be investing his RRSP money in the bank at the present time? Thank you. I'll hang up and wait for your answer.
You mean the Hong Kong Bank?
I think that's what you meant, Jack. Yeah. I don't think there's going to be any change in the Hong Kong Bank in 1997 when Hong Kong comes underneath mainland China. I don't think that'll be a change. And yes, in other words, I think we have a bank now that owns the Bank of British Columbia branch system that's larger than the Royal Bank of Canada. So I think that certainly the money that I have in that institution is completely safe.
You're going to leave it there?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, hi, Jack. I just, too, like to echo the sentiments of many British Columbians with respect to the demise of the Bank of B.C. But, you know, I think the Western premiers did not have any foresight in not participating in that bailout that he had recommended, simply because we would have had a base in Western Canada that would have been only equal by Eastern Canada, and I think they were short-sighted in not going along with it. Would you agree?
Can you agree? Can you tell us the story about how the Western provinces wouldn't support you? Did you not have some trouble with the province of British Columbia too?
Well, I mean, I have to say I certainly agree with the statement. because, I mean, obviously I had something personally to gain by the success of the bank, but I believed in it, which is why I felt fortunate to have the opportunity to take the job on. So I believed that we should have had support from the governments. But on the other hand, I've got to say, in defense of government, I'm not an elected official by the people of this province or Alberta, and they made the decision that it was a risk they shouldn't take on behalf of the electorate, and so that was their view versus ours.
Did they take any steps against you, including BC, to make it difficult for you?
No, I don't think so. Meaning, you would think that you would get preferential treatment because you're a local bank, but they certainly didn't take steps to hurt us.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I'd just like to say that it's too bad that Edgar didn't get lucky with the Denver Bronx. And maybe you're third time lucky, Mr. Kaiser.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. Kaiser that it was recently reported by an economist that the national energy policy formulated by the Liberals for the benefit of the East robbed the West of $90 billion over the lifetime of that plan. I wonder what effect this might have had on the Western banks.
Okay, I don't think that was a deciding factor. I think that that really falling oil prices, higher interest rates earlier this year, which were there to support a sagging Canadian dollar, it really hurt small Western Canadian businessmen. And I think that more than anything else was.
And don't forget, when you took over the bank, the first thing you had to do was to take a massive loan portfolio and sell it off at half price. Correct?
Correct.
These were bad loans or unwise loans made by the bank?
Well, in hindsight, they certainly were.
But nobody knew it was going to happen to the economy quite so quickly. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yep.
Yes, I'm calling from Whitehorse, and I'd like to congratulate Mr. Kaiser on his personal courage. And I was thinking back to in 1970 when Kaiser Resources was looking pretty bad and everybody else was leaving the ship pretty well. Mr. Kaiser was the last one with the courage to stand behind the organization. I thought we were going to shut down for a while, but we didn't.
What organization are you talking about? Kaiser Resources?
Kaiser Resources, the coal plant, yes, it's Barwood. And it's just too bad that, you know, he won that round. He won a big battle there, and it's just too darn bad that he wasn't as fortunate with with the Bank of B.C. as he was with Kaiser Resources.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mind you didn't do too badly out of Kaiser Resources, did you?
No, but the caller's right. At the time, it was a risk.
Yeah. Go ahead, please, from Salt Spring.
Yeah, hi, Jack. How you doing?
Not bad.
I have a question for Mr. Kaiser. I would, first of all, like to thank him for the gallant effort he did give for the Bank of B.C., but what I would like to know is there any any truth to the rumor that he might be heading up BC Hydro?
Well, I tried to get that out of him before, but he just kind of smiled modestly.
No, I didn't, Jack. That's not right.
You don't want the
I
job?
mean, no, the government has never talked to me about running BC Hydro.
Mm-hmm. No truth to rumor. Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Hello, I have two questions for Mr. Kaiser. I had heard talk before that Van City Credit Union had a serious interest in takeover of the Bank of B.C. Is this true? And if it was true, wouldn't it have been more desirable in his concept of having a Western bank in B.C.?
Well,
Western provinces, that Van City would take it over instead of a foreign bank? Thank you. I listened for his answer.
Well, it's a very good question. In fact, we did have discussions with Van City, but we never received an offer or a proposal that we could take to our board of directors or to the shareholders. But certainly, had that occurred, I mean, I think there are a lot of people in Western Canada that would have said that would have been better than the Hongkong Bank. But as it turned out, there was never an offer or anything we could do with
There were all
with
kinds of
Van City.
rumors that other banks might step in for a takeover bid. Did none of them ever come close to fruition? Did the federal government make it difficult for you to negotiate with other banks?
Well, none of them ever came to a proposal. We had discussions with many institutions, and in fact as many as we could find. to do that, but none of them were interested in a small retail institution based in Western Canada.
The actual deal today was not, of course, to approve the sale of the bank or anything. It was merely to approve the valuation of the bank. $200 million from CDIC to the Hongkong Bank and $63 million to the shareholders of the Bank of B.C. Is that correct?
That's right. The issue on the table today was whether or not we accepted the Hong Kong Bank offer, or a special assessor was appointed by the federal government to see whether or not there would be a different value.
Go ahead to Edgar Kaiser.
Yeah, hello. I get the feeling that in BC, we're just sitting in a darkened theater, having just seen the first act, and we're sitting there and we can hear the scenery being shuffled around and we can't see what is going on. There seems to be all these, like with Vancouver getting the free enterprise zone or whatever you want to call it, and then Hong Kong coming out in 1997, and like the scenery is being all changed and we can't put it together because of our vantage point. That's just an observation. And one question I have is, like, in 30 years, you're not going to come out with the Bank of B.C., the untold story, are you?
I don't know.
Okay, Edgar, what are your principal activities now that you're away from the Bank of B.C.?
Well, as of this afternoon, to go full-time back into the family businesses, which are headquartered here in Vancouver, but do operate worldwide. And I guess I have to say that obviously we're terribly disappointed it didn't work out, but I'm glad to be a private citizen again.
One other question. Your friends and business associates who with you put in 160-odd million new capital at the time in September '84, are any of them still talking to you?
Fortunately, yes, they are.
My thanks to Edgar Kaiser, former president and CEO of the Bank of British Columbia, which you know from here on in, what's left of it, as the Hong Kong Bank, correct? And I'll be back with Mayor Gordon Campbell after the break. Mayor Gordon Campbell of the City of Vancouver. Interesting to hear Edgar Kaiser admit that he doesn't know quite how much he lost, but he and his friends put in 160 million, which today will be worth about 16 million. Makes you shudder, doesn't it?
It's tough, yeah.
Listen, on the bank, and I know you've been all over the place on the International Banking Centre in British Columbia, I have this nasty little sneaking suspicion that there might be suitcase banking, offshore banking brought into Vancouver, not all the most desirable, and not really a very attractive proposition. Convince me I'm wrong.
Well, it is an attractive proposition for the City of Vancouver. What it does is it gives us an opportunity to provide for offshore loans and deposits. And
tax-free?
Tax-free to the depositors, right?
That's clear, is it?
That's from the legislation that I have seen and the definitions of the legislation I've seen. I understand that's what they're going to do.
If I put in 20 million from Hong Kong and put it in Vancouver, I can use that, make money on it, on international business transactions without paying Canadian income tax.
So I understand this situation, yes.
Duty-free money?
Yes.
But how will that do anything to encourage, for instance, the growth of secondary industry in British Columbia?
Well, it doesn't encourage the growth of secondary industry, Jack, and one of the things that we have to recognize in the new economy is that secondary industry or tertiary industry isn't necessarily what we're looking for. We are in a service economy. Vancouver is not going to become a manufacturing center of Canada. It is going to become a Pacific center for Canada, and the tool gives us an opportunity and perhaps a little bit of a competitive advantage over San Francisco, Seattle, and Los Angeles, and that's the market that we've got to go up against.
But I can understand why Peterson of Ontario is annoyed. If I can bring my money in here, wheel and deal from a Canadian base and pay no tax, that's better, for instance, than the big five banks can do in Toronto, isn't it?
Yes, it's not the same situation as the big five banks, but you know, the situation that Mr. Peterson is trying to generate here is strictly political, and I believe that Mr. Wilson has said and he did say in February that he was going to set this up to give the national economy, the national banking system, an opportunity to build. We have many situations in Ontario where infant industries are protected by the federal government. This happens to be an infant industry in Vancouver or an infant industry in Montreal, which I think will serve the national interest and in fact will reinforce Toronto's financial position and financial supremacy in Canada.
Peterson's nose is out of joint anyway on the 15% tax levied this side of the border. He's very much afraid of some kind of precedent on the free trade deals.
Well, Ontario always has a different position than the rest of the country on most of these issues, and I believe that Mr. Peterson's got other political problems that he's dealing with, and he's looking, I think, as I understand it, an election sometime this summer, and it doesn't hurt for him to be standing up for Ontario against the federal government bogeymen.
There was a lot of shouting last night at that meeting in Marpole about illegal suites. Now, I live in Vancouver now, and I don't want illegal suites in my neighborhood. I want you to throw them out on the street.
Well, first of all, the primary responsibility that we have in Vancouver is to try and protect our existing neighborhoods, whether they're medium density or single family densities. The new houses that are going in our neighborhoods right now, where the people are going in and they're duplexing and triplexing in our single family neighborhoods, and the situation in Marpole was a situation where the rezoning would have called for a 6 times increase in density over single family density, and people don't want that in this city. And so we are not going to have that. And we have set our staff on a course that I think sends a clear message that we don't want to have an increase in illegal suites. We do not want duplexing going on illegally in Vancouver, and we're going to try and make sure that that doesn't happen.
At the moment, you've only taken action on complaints. Do you plan to take action by inspectors in the future and perhaps lift the licenses of real estate agents who advertise, you know, in effect advertise illegal suites, increasing the value of the home?
We have dealt with the real estate board and real estate agents already through our permits and licenses department. We do not want single-family residences advertised as duplexes or income generators. We have suggested to our staff that they come back with what they would call an enforcement program. I have no intention of creating 100 additional inspectors to run all over the city and try and find out where illegal suites are. What the key here, Jack, is this. People want to know they have control over their neighborhoods. If there is a situation where they have a complaint, they expect the city to go in and to enforce it. The best enforcers, the best people to make sure that we have that taken care of are the people in their neighborhoods.
The neighbors.
The neighbors. And they will be the ones that will register the complaints. And when there is a complaint, we will go and enforce.
I felt sorry for that chap in West 24th the other day. I think it was Mr. Wilson, who's faced with the prospect of tearing out his attic accommodation and just reducing it to bare boards. Does seem a bit silly, doesn't it?
There are many things in the single-family zoning that we have problems with. We have left it alone for 50 years, and it is in the last 2 to 3 years that it's really started to rear its head. The problem for Mr. Wilson was he went in, he did something that was in fact illegal, he did it without permits, and the council is not going to condone that kind of thing.
But he's surrounded by illegal suites. You must now go around his neighborhood and throw out all the illegal suites, to be fair.
If the people in the neighborhood think that he's surrounded by illegal suites, then they should come and complain and we'll go and enforce.
Listen, you've got to trim how much from the city's budget? 10%?
No. What the goal that I've set for us is no real increase in the cost of government, which means it will go up at approximately 5%, which is the rate of inflation. To do that, we are going to have to look very hard at all of our expenditures and make sure that we're not wasting any money.
Well, Harcourt and Rankin, that terrible duo, that delightful duo, you might say, but of course fully committed to the fact that nobody would ever be laid off. Are you committed, too, to the fact that nobody should ever be laid off?
No, I think when there are superfluous jobs, when there are jobs that are redundant, what we should be doing is we should be taking those people and we should see if they can go to other occupations or other things within the city staff. But if they're redundant, then they have to be laid off.
They got to go.
It's not my money here we're dealing with, Jack. It's taxpayers' money, and I think we have a responsibility to those people to deal with their money the way we deal with our own.
Fair wage issue. What has happened on that? Because, as I recall, we had a union price policy. No, we didn't. We had a kind of...
We had a dictated wage policy where we were saying that the wage that people had to pay was QP 1004 plus 28%.
For fringe benefits?
Yes.
In other words, a non-union contractor had to pay QP 1004 contract plus the 28% for fringe benefits.
Right. Even a union contractor had to pay QP 1004 plus 28%.
Even if he was paying less?
Right. Yeah. The fact of the matter is that what we were doing was we were requiring outside people to bid more than we would pay ourselves on some jobs. Again, that does not make any sense.
Is that to keep the work within the city?
I don't know what the rationale was. I'd voted against it all along, and I don't think there was rationale for the movement when it started. This is not a fair wage issue, though, Jack. This is an issue of a dictated wage. I mean, people seem to think that this is a deal, we're dealing with $4. We're dealing with the difference between a $15 wage rate, which is a typical wage rate in the community, and $20 and some odd cents, which is what we are telling people they must pay. So it's a legislated wage policy, not a fair wage policy.
Have you yet changed that?
We did not impose that constraint on the contract that we let in December, and there is going to be a major public hearing on it on Tuesday night. I'm sure we'll hear from many of our friends about it.
So your policy now in effect is that they must pay a fair wage
Yes?
of, we'll take $15 for an average.
Right, that's what is typical in the community right
And
now.
the bidder must certify as paying that, but he does not have to add another 28% on top of QP 1004.
What I believe is that what the process and the policy we had before was correct, which is an outside contractor has to pay what is called the going rate in the community. That is in the city charter. I believe that system worked. And what we've done by imposing a wage requirement of, for example, $20 an hour for some people, the tradespeople, what we've done there is we've added costs to the city. We've added costs to contracts. There's clear, yes, Hastings East, there was a clear added cost. The fire hall, there was a clear added cost, plus a cost for enforcement of approximately $40,000 to $50,000 a year. Again, it's not our money. I think we have to deal with it the way we deal with our own money.
That's a major change. Your calls to Mayor Gordon Campbell of Vancouver after the break. The waterworks going to blow apart?
No, they're not.
We're all right, are we?
Well, so far, we're going to be okay. Yeah. No, it's going to be fine, I think, Jack.
Go ahead to Mayor Campbell.
Good afternoon, Jack and Mayor Campbell.
Afternoon.
I wanted to ask a question about the fair wage bylaw that you were just discussing.
Yes?
What about a situation where a contractor is paying his employees 20 or 30 or 40% below the union rate, but his bid comes in 1 or 2% below a union company? Who wins in that situation?
Well, what we have done in the city in the past is we have decided that the best way for us to decide on contracts is the ability of the contractor to do the work, the ability to deliver the work on time, and the cost, so that we're dealing with value. We don't typically dig into the contractor's background, budget papers to figure out how much he's paying to each of his workers.
But that is a situation that could quite easily happen, and it would end up costing the city just as much as if they'd kept the fair wage bylaw.
Well, I think, to be honest, I don't think it will ever cost as much as it does with the fair wage bylaw, if for no other reason than we avoid the administrative and the regulatory role for the city. But the evidence, again, that I have from the brief experience we've had with this is, in fact, we see the costs going up because as a result of this dictated or legislated wage amount that we have there. So it's difficult to define it, it's difficult to understand it, but it seems to me when you've gone for 50 years with fair wage legislation which has worked, which you've never received a complaint on, that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to change it so that it costs the taxpayers a lot of extra money.
Who did that, Harcourt?
Yes, it was done in 1985.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, two questions, Mayor Campbell. First question is on the extension of the ALRT through the Dunbar area, the Arbutus area, $72 million for CP that wants to sell that line to the provincial government. You're a member of Mayor's Filing Realty in the past. And the second question is the development on Renfrew and Hastings, Zen Aquilini project,
yes,
which has been redundant for the last 5 years. I'd like both of those things addressed, especially the $72 million ALRT extension through Arbutus to Richmond. What is the Vancouver City position on that?
Vancouver City Council's position on that has been that we have asked the provincial government to preserve the right-of-way. We have asked the CRTC to preserve the Canadian Transport Commission to preserve the right-of-way because we think we have to maintain it over a period of time. Currently, as we've pointed out unanimously in council, both this council and the last council, it is absurd to have a right-of-way which is assessed for tax purposes at $600,000 and which the railway would like $72 million for. So that's the status of that. We have no direct control over that. We've simply intervened with the CTC. With regard to the other question, which was, what was it? It was, the Zen Aquilini situation. We, as you know, are governed, the city is governed by laws like everybody else. We regularly review the safety of the crane, etc. We have tried to have that fixed, but in fact, we have nothing that we can do about it other than what we're doing, which is making sure that it's safe for the public.
Very weak and very thin, Mr. Campbell.
Good, thank you. We continue our next call. He'll be on all night. I think he's a guy who phones somewhat too regularly. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mayor Campbell. I live in a neighborhood. We have one house. It's a single-family area. One house is split into 4 suites.
Yes.
And those people That house has been under review for over 10 years. The cities have been trying to get it closed down or whatever, or where they work it. But they park their cars all over the place all the time. And the city has the bylaws, the 3-hour and 2-hour bylaws, where they cannot park it. And when they park in front of the house and we complain, they come and put a ticket on, and then your checkers tell them they can leave their car there.
After the ticket?
Yeah, they will not ticket it again, no matter how long they leave it there.
I haven't heard that complaint before. I've heard the complaint about the suites, and I know the problem of the parking, and I know the problem of the enforcement, but I hadn't heard that they were told that they could just leave their cars there after the ticket.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm wondering what the status is of the Cassiar connector. And it seems like to me they've been studying it for years, and both sides supported it in the election. I was just wondering when we might expect construction.
The Cassiar connector.
I love this. You know, I've been mayor now for 2 months, and I'm going to solve all these problems in 2 months. But the Cassiar connector is something that we have as a council put at the top of our priority list. I met with the premier on it 2 weeks ago. I told him it was important. It's a $70 million cost, which he swallowed very hard at. But it's important to us in the city from the point of view of protecting the neighborhoods and also providing goods movement from the port. And I believe that we are going to be able to move on that in the near future. There's no provincial commitment to do that, but it's certainly the top priority that I have. So hopefully we'll get it done and not wait another 6 years to have it done.
Go ahead, please.
Hi. I live in a basement suite on the downtown east side, actually by the ALRT station, and I'm not directly affected by the illegal suites because ours is not a legal suite. But I know from my point of view that I happen to be of a low income, and if I had to get out of my legal suite, I would probably have to go into a regular apartment, which basically would break me. Now, what is going to happen to these legal suites? Because as the rising cost of apartments go, I'm not going to have any money. So
what's going to happen to you?
What's going to happen to this gentleman? He evidently isn't in a legal suite, so he'll be left there.
No, he's in one.
No, I'm not in a illegal suite, but my building
let me just
be torn down to make apartments.
Okay, well, let me just talk to you about the whole question. The purpose of saying that we are going to enforce the bylaw, as I have said, is not to go and to rip everybody out or every suite out that's illegal in the city. We have had in the city a policy of enforcing on complaint from the neighborhood, so that if a suite or if the density in the neighborhood is in fact adding to the deterioration of the neighborhood, I think we have a responsibility to uphold our bylaws. We are not going to go on a search and destroy mission here. And I understand that there are a number of suites in the city, and they've been there for a long time. There are many in my neighborhood, and I don't have any complaints about them, so they'll remain.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Yes, regarding more policemen for the Vancouver Police Force.
Mm-hmm.
The Vancouver Police Force seems to be lacking police, especially on traffic when there's an accident. I guess you've heard about this.
I have certainly heard about a lack of police, yes.
That's not the policeman's fault. But regarding accidents, they do not come to accidents
I think
that are $6,000.
Yeah, they wiped out much of the accident investigation a long while, except for major accidents.
Right, that's right. And then one of the reasons they do that is because of their manpower situation and the priorities that they set. And one of the major reviews that we'll be going through in the very near future, I think it's a week Thursday, will be the police department to try and see what we can do to solve that problem. But Jack, I get a lot of comments about police all over the city.
I think they're doing a marvelous job.
We've got a great police force, there's no doubt about it.
Go ahead, please. Oh, last call. I haven't time to take the call now, as a matter of fact. But that was informative tonight. 2 months as mayor?
Almost 2 months, coming up in a week.
How much do you miss old Uncle Harry?
I don't miss him at all.
I'll tell him that on Monday morning.
He probably doesn't miss me either.
My thanks to Mayor Gordon Campbell of Vancouver. I'll be back after the break. Learn something new every day, I always say, or sometimes say. And for instance, I learned today that Canada is about to have, I'm told, a brand new television network called Seneca, which is going to feed information and programming to 1,000 native communities throughout the country. But so you'll know what I'm talking about, here's how they tell me it's supposed to work.
Will open up new vistas of communication never before available in Canada. Now, people in distant communities can shop in metropolitan centers. Seneca will provide a consumer catalog library service. It will enable people in distant communities to shop for a whole line of products without incurring the expense of time and travel. And the Seneca system suddenly opens up the world to electronic banking. Instant access to a complete range of sophisticated financial services up to now denied by distance. Via the Seneca system, essential health services to distant communities can be greatly improved through health promotion programs. Paramedics can be trained. Doctors can be consulted. In the field of education and training, there are unlimited possibilities. Educational institutions can easily extend school programs or training courses to any community. Instructors can be seen and heard live. Students can instantly interact with the video teacher. Course material can be sent and received by fax machine. Exams can now be...
And here in the studio with me now is Tony Belcourt, who is Vice President of Seneca Communications. I didn't know that we were going to build another government television network across this country, Tony.
It's not a government network.
What is it exactly?
Well, it's a private network. We've been developing the idea for more than 5 years, and last year we were able to put the final finishing touches on the design, and all of the studies were completed, and the financing was put together.
Is this peculiarly a network for native communities covering all across the country, running from which satellite?
Off Anik D2.
Anik D2. How have you financed? How much does it cost, and who's going to pay for it?
It's a $30 million capital investment to begin with. All of the money is private investment. Our major investors are the Canada Steamship Lines, CSL Group. The company operates to generate revenues and keep itself going.
Fair enough now. You're going to put in 1,000 communities, right? So there'll be 1,000 downlinks across the country. I gather that it's not possible to put it on the normal television networks or the normal satellites we now have up there.
Well, we want to be on Anik D2, which is the newest of the satellites where there's space to grow, because we think there's more activity, certainly during popular hours, and that will require we have more than one transponder. The other satellites are all busy.
Now, you won't be carrying Three's Family or The Cosby Show or any of that stuff?
No.
How many hours a day will you broadcast when you're in full operation?
We'll be going the full television broadcast day when we're in full operation. We're on air now 2 hours a day.
Have you done any experimentation with it anywhere? In other words, are you feeding, where is your broadcasting headquarters?
We're broadcasting out of the Kahnawake Reserve, just outside Montreal.
Oh, Koganawawa. What do you call it, Kogana?
It's Kahnawake to the Mohawk people. Kakhnawaga is the other way that it's pronounced. We broadcast from there. We have 10 test sites across the country, and we're now making a decision on putting in the installation of the first 50 sites over the next 2 months.
Now, who supplies the equipment for the native communities? Does the Federal Indian Affairs Department put in the money for the downlinks and all the facilities required there?
No, we put the downlinks in. Our company will finance the entire installation.
This is a non-subsidized operation at the moment, is it?
Absolutely. It's not subsidized at all and isn't meant to be subsidized.
And where will the programming come from? What kind of programming will you do, and who will prepare and pay for that?
Well, the programming is going to come from the people who are going to want to put television signals on the air. Indian bands that want to have education programs to supplement high school teachers that they have now. They want to have a specialty science teacher, for example. If people want to have special training programs, vocational training programs on television, those programs will be put on the air. People who want to have consultation on fisheries during fishing season, they'll put the programs on the air.
How about consultation on land claims?
Yes, absolutely.
Political issues?
Absolutely. In fact, during this forthcoming First Ministers' Conference, we hope to have some studio facilities in Ottawa and special hookups so there can be live video conferencing between people here in British Columbia, for example, and the leaders down in Ottawa, so that not everybody needs to go to Ottawa, and certainly in these times of restraint, there's no need for everybody to go to Ottawa. They don't have the money. So there'll be some cost savings that way by using a system like this.
How about the problems of getting trained staff from the native communities so that you're playing a full part in it and not using people who are not native oriented?
We have a surprising cadre of people who are already trained in the business of developing education. We have people who are in production now, certainly not the volume of people that we're going to require, but it will grow.
Create some new careers if nothing else, is that correct?
Well, of course it will. We have access to something for the first time that will be a native owned, a native controlled, and native oriented television network.
Will it be a political weapon, to ask that again, just whatever way you want to take politics? Not that it shouldn't be, perhaps, but just wondering.
Well, it could be used for political purposes during elections and so on. Why not? People use conventional television systems for that purpose. They buy time or they advertise. And I would see that people who want to get a message across and it's a political orientation, they're going to take time on our system.
And you're going to put specialized, what I don't quite get clear, you say CSL is putting up $30 million. The native communities will pay for their own installations from whatever funds they have. Is that correct?
No, we'll pay for the installations. The people who buy time on the system will create the revenues.
Who's going to buy the time, though? I mean, for instance, you talk about medical expertise and consultation. Who's going to buy that time?
Department of Health and Welfare.
Ah.
Or Indian bands who have taken over a tribal council that's taken over health care. All of their health care has been transferred to the tribal council. They may want to buy some time.
1,000 throughout the country eventually. How long will that take you?
It'll take us well over a year to get the 1,000 in.
To be seen in the native communities, will you have to go to a central point like Knowledge Network special broadcasts?
In some places, yes. In places where they have community broadcasting, we'll be providing them another signal that they can put on in their communities.
In other words, a cable, but you won't be able to get it on your normal television set.
Well, you can get it on your normal television set, yes. Mind you, we have to have the system in place, the broadcasting system in place in the community to get it on your local cable.
And you've started already?
We've started already.
And you'll be finished when? When will it be complete?
Well, we don't think we're going to be complete for many, many years. The system is going to grow. We see these downlinks being at schools, at band offices, at health centers, as well as in cable companies. So it'll grow over the years.
My thanks to Tony Belcourt, former president of the Native Council of Canada. Is that Smokey Briere?
Smokey Briere is the president now.
Smokey the Bear, he told me to call him, and now vice president of Seneca Communications. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
I'll be back after the break. Monday, I'm going to try and take a sane look at the sex education problem in the schools. People are going off, in all directions. But I'm also going to interview Jeffrey Simpson of the Globe and Mail, one of our most expert political commentators in the country, even if he is from Toronto. That's Monday for sure for Webster at 5 p.m. precisely. Stay tuned for Tony.